Thank you very much, Your Excellency. So, street off and all protocols observed, a phrase that I don't necessarily like, but one that is respectful of those who are present. I have a great difficulty in talking and can't see people, so you will forgive me for leaving the podium on occasion. But this evening is a special evening in more ways than I can begin to express to you, and one that requires a combination of reflection and emotion that is unusual for prime ministers in the Caribbean. So I ask your forgiveness first and foremost for that. And I ask your forgiveness also for speaking before dinner and delaying your dinner. But at a very early age, I learned that speeches after dinner are for people who have certain skills that would earn them the title of comedian. And since I have not yet gained those skills, I know that all I might do is force upon you a level of indigestion that the QEH cannot handle at this point in time. So that I have chosen, therefore, to share a few thoughts with you in this address, recognizing that our country has been blessed. And our country has been blessed to have been guided and nurtured in the last 75 to 80 years by a number of people who understood that excellence must be their hallmark in the determination of the path that they chose to carry us upon. And that excellence was not confined to those who had the ultimate title of head of government or head of state, but the leadership so exhibited by those who were head of government meant that others understood that leadership also existed at any and every level of this society. I remember as a child wishing that I was old enough at the time of independence to be in the vanguard of fighting those battles to which Avi referred in his excellent speech just now. But I've come to learn that nothing happens by accident and nothing happens before it's time. And I stand here as Prime Minister of Barbados, happy that I have a country that has known what it is in its early days to be led by men, predominantly, and women, who were able to craft for us a pathway that allowed us to own the words of our national anthem and to be firm craftsmen of our faith. And those firm craftsmen of our faith were not limited to those who had the privilege of political office, but they ranged from the fishermen to the vendors, from those who crafted laws to those who tended to patients, from those who raised children to those who nurtured the elderly. But they did it conscious of a set of values that were reinforced in this society that we would do well to preserve and to emanate and to pass on to our children. I count myself lucky to have the benefit of many experiences. And I stand before you tonight conscious that I may well be the last Prime Minister who may have known every Prime Minister since the father of independence, Errol Barrow, in 1966. But in his case, it was a unique relationship. as strange as it may seem to many. And many in this room know that of which I speak. My two grandfathers passed in 1973 and 1975. And in a very real sense, from 1976 onwards, after Errol Barrow became a non-prime minister, he was effectively a living force in my life and was effectively the person who stood as my grandfather in almost every sense. I came home many an afternoon from school, and that was who was there in order to guide, to school, and to explain many things to me, particularly in the years 1978 and 79 as a young secondary school student. The notion that I should attend the London School of Economics and not attend any other institution was shaped by him, not by my father. But he found comfort with my father and Henry Ford in encouraging me to go to Middle Temple. And as fate would have it, as many of you have heard during the prelude and up to the last election, he was the one who referred me to Middle Temple to allow me to become, along with Sir Henry, a member of that venerable institution for which I'm now a bencher. But I say these things because it is important for us to recall that this country was not forged simply by political speeches and political statements, but it was forged by character and forged by persons who were committed first and foremost to Barbados. And that commitment to Barbados meant that there are some things that simply shall not divide us. The Barbados that I lead today, I want to be able to be reflective in that respect. I am conscious that when Errol Barrow stood and remarked that we shall be friends of all and satellites of none, little did he know that that statement would be embraced by every single prime minister and government that succeeded him. It is as valid today, perhaps even more so, than it was at the time of its initial delivery. And I say so, conscious that principles only mean something when it is inconvenient to stand by them. Conscious that this region must always check itself to ensure that we not become the pawns of others, the satellites of others, but that we keep evermost and uppermost in our minds what we must do for our people without simply becoming pawns on a chessboard for others to be able to benefit from. I am conscious that in the next week questions will be asked as to whether the Barbados Foreign Minister happened to be missing from a meeting in Kingston, in Jamaica, that will take place on Tuesday. And we don't look to pick fights. I don't look to pick fights. But I am conscious that if this country does not stand for something, then it will fall for anything. As chairman of CARICOM, it is impossible for me to agree that my foreign minister should attend a meeting with anyone to which members of CARICOM are not invited. If some are invited and not all, then it is an attempt to divide this region. But that sense of commitment to principle and that sense of commitment to the thesis expressed by him that we have lived by, friends of all, satellites of none, is really what inspires us to this position today. And therefore, it didn't take a lot of thought as to what our decision should be, because this country does not pretend to be what it is not, and does not pretend to have that which it doesn't. But it does aspire to be sincere, and to be correct and to be moral and to be principled. Barbados First, as expressed by both Grantley Adams and Errol Barrow, has come to mean for us that Barbados must stand for something. And I give thanks that that expression of leadership to that person who first gave us the right to vote, then that person who gave us the right to independence, has been followed for the most part by this country and its leaders. Similarly, the understanding that we shall not loiter on colonial premises or loiter on any premises where we are not wanted continues to be as relevant today as it was then. The expression delivered to the President of the United States of America, who offered to pay our dues to join the Organization of American States, when Mr. Barrow politely refused and said, in our part of the world where I come from, if you cannot afford the dues, you do not join the club. That is the Barbados First to which I speak. But I also want to speak and share with you the perspective that Errol Barrow didn't only see Barbados as Barbados, but he said to us in very clear terms, and in terms that I have come to appreciate because my own political party has as part of its constitution the pursuit of regional integration. A quote that has forever inspired me, that in a country where both the father of independence and the father of democracy have expressed these terms, one cannot go wrong in continuing to support them. Errol Barrow delivered himself of the quotation, I am a West Indian, and there is no one who is more West Indian by birth or by inclination or otherwise than I am. I have come to understand that that statement was not just rhetoric, but it was a commitment to the kind of society and to the kind of policies that would build a strong, vibrant West Indian nation, understanding that if we are divided, we cannot be able to achieve for our people that which ought to be their natural inheritance and legacy as a platform to be able to ensure that we can create global citizens with West Indian values. In understanding, as he did in that most seminal of speeches in 1986 in Georgetown, that we have the reality of a shared lived experience where ordinary people have seized their destiny to be Caribbean people, only awaiting the arrival of the politicians to validate that which they have already expressed as lived reality, is perhaps one of the most powerful sentiments to guide any Caribbean Prime Minister as we move forward in this regional integration movement. We cannot fight the climate crisis on our own. We cannot fight the battles of the geopolitical instability that is now taking hold of this world on our own. Avi spoke just now of ownership being important and mattering in circumstances where we were dulled, we were, I almost want to say offended, by the images of persons being killed as if others were simply playing a video game in a manner that could disturb the stability of the world in which we live. This was a sobering moment for us all because while we live in a world where we claim sovereignty, we live in a world where individual countries are unable to shape their destiny without an appreciation of the global realities. And it is that understanding more than any other that compels us to the reality of the need for regional integration. I refer to these comments because, once again, like the earlier quotations to which I referred you from Mr. Barrow, they are as valid today as they were at the time at which they were made more than 30, 35 years ago. But the other aspect of Mr. Barrow's life, performance, tenure, character that matters is that he was promoter in chief. He was promoter in chief of this nation called Barbados. In everything he did, in everything he said, he put forward the best interests of this country. And he inspired in many around him the same. And I don't need to go into the details of it because as I look across this room, many of you know that of which I speak. What perhaps is lacking more than any other factor in our current Barbados, in spite of the power of technology, in spite of the power of amplification, is the willingness of each and every one of us to become promoters in chief in the same way that Mr. Barrow was promoter in chief for Barbados. We have chosen, more often than not, to use the social media and the technology to share that which offends, that which concerns, that which disturbs us. But I ask us, how often do we share it to promote that which represents the excellence of Barbados, that which represents the ease of Barbados? How often do we share that people like Rihanna can still come home and walk in Broad Street and Swan Street without a multitude of guards protecting her? How often do we share that in a country this size, that we have in her and in Cigar for the Sobers, the greatest of all time, persons who have not lost their humility and who continue to be gracious and who continue always to display gratitude, but who above all else, in all that they have done, have exhibited a spirit of inclusiveness, reflecting the social justice and the passion for social justice that Mr. Barrow and others who we have been fortunate to call leaders have reflected in our nation. When Rihanna exhibited a new makeup line that had a color for every single complexion on this earth, she was not simply making a commercial decision. She was reflecting an attitude to life that was imbued in her in this nation of Barbados that we have shaped. When others have come at us and wonder why is it we don't break for ourselves, then if they do not understand who Barbadians are and what Barbadians celebrate. And while tonight I may speak in terms of this speech, recognizing the centenary of Errol Walton Barrow, let it never be said that that same approach was not exhibited by his sister. We have come as a nation to this juncture much as human beings have come to the prime of their life. We've had a relatively good life as an independent nation. But like human beings, we've had a few things that have caused us to stumble. And it is not the things that cause us to stumble that must define us, but it is the things that cause us to stand up and fight back that will determine whether we have inherited the legacy of those early leaders who carried the flame of nationhood and who reimagined what might be possible for a people who, for the most part, were exploited and denied the opportunity for progress, and for prosperity. I ask us tonight to reflect on these things because simply to celebrate the centenary without living the values, without living and celebrating the country, without allowing Barbados first to be our mantra, as we have done, without recognizing that there are simply some things for which there must be no partisan divide. And let me not cause you to believe that this was only preserved under Mr. Barrow's time, because those of us who understood the importance of tone and tenor of the leaders that we had before also understood that whether it was in the shipwrighter agreement or whether it was in the maritime delimitation dispute with Trinidad and Tobago, or whether it was simply in the unified position for the establishment of the Caribbean Court of Justice as our final court of appeal, that this country has excelled because it knows how to unite and to put Barbados first above all else and above all things. I commit to you tonight to take the best of what has been bequeathed to us from those leaders who have shone and who exhibited a courage and a sense of purpose, a mission that allowed us to be able to move beyond the ordinary, to recognize, yes, that we could punch above our weight. But as I shared with the country on the 2nd of January, to punch above our weight now is simply not going to be good enough. For in this world where technology drives people, where movement may be a la Jetsons by jet propulsion, or in Avi's terms, where robots may guide our actions, we have now to recognize that people have choices. And in those choices, they can or they cannot. They may or they may not. And what must commend us is the effort that we put in all that we do, ever mindful that a country that has known discrimination for the majority of its life cannot perpetuate discrimination in any form. That a country that has known what it is to fight injustice that was perpetrated against simply too many cannot in any way be content with anybody for any reason, in any guise, perpetrating injustices. And that a country that knows what it is to allow people to rise irrespective of their circumstances of birth must forever create opportunity and must forever be committed to opening the windows of the nation and airing the house, to use a good old Bajan metaphor, to ensure that we forever remain focused on the mission of allowing each and every Barbadian to be the best that they can be. This is not going to happen by serendipity. And this is not going to happen by the reliance on legacy, as happens too often, regrettably, in our society. It happens by dint of the reflection of the values and the energy and the hard work that means that every generation starts with an advantage because the generation that went before understood its duty to pay forward and not simply to exhaust what they inherited by reason of spontaneity or by reason of simply ignoring the benefit of the legacy. I ask us equally to recognize that courage is perhaps the greatest virtue Errol Walton Barrow had, and others of his generation, and those who went before. Indeed, his uncle, Charles Duncan O'Neill, indeed, the right excellent Charles Duncan O'Neill, I should say, and the right excellent Bradley Adams. For they walked lonely roads, where in a room this large, they might have been the only voice. But then we have the example throughout history of others who understood that breaking new ground required courage to walk alone and to walk sometimes under the cloud of darkness because the mass of noise that comes from others can very often dim the light on you and cloud out your voice from the rest of the noise. I cannot imagine the exceptional courage that it took to be able to craft that route for our people. Because even as we move today, it requires extraordinary courage for us to take the decisions from as simple as the one that I referred to earlier, out of principle, rather than to take the decisions that are easy to allow us to fade in to the background of the people. But I could leave here tonight with you feeling that this is just a somber moment without reminding you of the emotions and the humanity of the man and indeed his sister in whose name we also celebrate his trust. And I do so conscious that that is as much of the allure that this country holds because we don't talk about Errol Walton Barrow. We talk about the dipper. We talk about the skipper. And everyone has their own story. And everyone has their own fond memory. Because what he ungodly inculcated was a different relationship with people whom they represented that has allowed us never to forget, as political operators, where we must stand with respect to the people who are responsible for our being here. I will never forget in 1986 when my father determined that he was never going to give us pocket money and that if you wanted money, you had to go and work for it yourself. And I came up with a brilliant idea, loving culture, that I was going to have a stall for Bridgetown Market. And there was a man called Hopi. In fact, that family had so many deaf boys that unless you knew which one I'm talking about, you were possibly at risk of forgetting who it was. But Hopi had pity on a young girl like me, student in London, and agreed to have the stall with me. And when Uncle Errol heard that I was having it, he called me the night before. He had just won the election in '86. And he called me the night before and he said, I am coming down there tomorrow morning. Make sure you have pork chops, make sure you have tankery, and make sure you have coraton. Well, of course, I had enough for what I thought was necessary. But little did I know that when he came, he was going to stay from 10 o'clock till 7 o'clock at night. And that being the aftermath of an election, whether a person voted for him or not, every person who came into the stall wanted to buy him a drink and to buy him some food. And therefore, I must tell you that I don't know of ever being involved in a more profitable venture than on that occasion. On that single day in 1986, on that Saturday, we sold over more than $10,000 in goods, which when translated to today's prices, you would begin to understand what it meant for us on that occasion. Every time I go into Tweedside Road, as some may, and Marsha is smiling because I perhaps spend a little more time there than I should, at a man called Freddy's, I'm reminded, and I look at Janine and others, that Auntie Nita also had her own special relationship with Tweedside Road. The only difference being is that she had the ability as head of state to command delivery, and I have to go as prime minister to mix with the people. Believe you me, this country is a blessed country. And we have had the benefit of good people who have understood first and foremost what it is to be Barbadian before they start to belong to any tribe. I've come to this point at this moment conscious that nothing happens by accident. And I give thanks that I have the opportunity to speak at this centenary dinner, conscious that irrespective of different political parties, irrespective of all else that may cause us sometimes, and I say so knowing that Errol Barrow was perhaps, like Tom Adams, one of the most fearsome of political adversaries that this country will ever know. But the nature of the adversarial politics never allowed them to compromise the integrity of this nation's sovereignty or nationhood. And it is that tone and tenor, more than any else, that I want to also ask us to celebrate. It is the example of his being promoter in chief of all that represented excellence in this nation, that I ask not just those of you in this room, but all in this country to reflect and celebrate, because more than ever, your country needs you now to be a promoter in chief of all that we can offer. When I ask us to contemplate that we can be world class in 7 years, it sounds like a lot, but it is simply about upping our game and sucking it up and digging in and doing better, because the circumstances which we have and we face do not have to be our future, but that which we are committed to do and to fight against and to rise above is more capable of determining a picture of excellence worthy of the legacy that we have inherited. We cannot stay in time, but the one thing that is timeless is our values. And may we forever celebrate the values of those famous men and women who went before us and who understood that theirs was a mission that required extraordinary courage, discipline, commitment, and creativity. And can we now honor them by the manner in which we are committed equally to exhibit that discipline, creativity, honesty, fairness, and all the other things that make it possible for different people of different backgrounds, of different ages, of different perspectives to live on a little rock, 166 square miles, 14 by 21, but more appropriately, ma'am, one smile away. Thank you, and God bless.